Hi, and welcome to my channel. My name is Betsy Bohan, and I'm a nurse of over 40 years with a passion for helping people. Today, my video is part 2 of my story and my testimony called The Social Worker's Daughter, The Power of Love, Faith, and Forgiveness. If you have not seen my introduction as to why I'm giving my testimony and finally telling a story after 46 years when my life changed dramatically, you'll want to listen and watch my video from the intro. And then also you'll want to watch part 1 in the beginning, so you will have an understanding and a context from which to watch part 2, which I've entitled The Descent. I do want to let you know that these videos are not for children or younger people. This is adult context, and I've been advised by several trusted individuals that have clinical background to give a trigger warning. Now, I remember years ago when people gave testimonies, and some of them were pretty difficult and challenging, and they had bad backgrounds where they didn't give trigger warnings. In books you can read that don't have a trigger warning, but I'm going to respect them and the fact that actually the mental health area does use the word trigger as a way to let people know that there might be some difficult context or difficult content in the video or whatever it might be, whatever type of media. And so they may want to think about how they want to view it, if they want to view it, if they want to listen, should they have somebody with them. You get the picture. Anyway, as far as for myself, I realize after all I've been through, which if you watch all my videos, which seems like it may be just a little mini series for the end of summer. Well, there's a lot to pack in there. Anyway, that I will probably have triggers until the day I die, which is okay by me. I've just accepted that. I've been through so much trauma and difficult things, but I will tell you one thing, they're not as many, and if I do get triggered, I know what it's from typically, and I can handle it a lot better, especially because of what the Lord has done in my life. And as I said, that's part of why I'm telling my story and doing these videos, because I realize that there are so many people, and millions actually, and millions of girls and women that have gone through really difficult things, maybe not necessarily like mine. Everybody's got their own story, some not as much, some very much more, and others as well, boys, men, really people in general that go through difficult things. And I refuse to stay silent when the information that I've used and that God's taught me can benefit others. I also want you to know, if there are other people that provide healing measures in other faiths, such as New Age and things like that, it is my choice to provide what's helped me, which is a commitment to Jesus Christ and healing through a biblical understanding. And I'll be able to tell you that after I finish my whole story here in the next weeks, and I'll be able to let people know exactly how I healed. I'll be starting things like that to actually help people. So what's in this video? Part 2, The Descent, video content includes me talking about violence, abuses of various kinds, and other events and descriptions that may be difficult to listen to and cause upset or discomfort. Only you know how you react, and you should choose if you should watch it. In the telling of my story, even the uncomfortable parts have a purpose and meaning. It helps me, and it helps those viewing, to be able to identify with me and to be able to realize that she kind of knows what I'm going through, and I want to listen to her because maybe she'll be able to help me. And I know that's what occurred with me, and that's how I grew. was by listening to stories of others that were farther along than me and applying the principles and the things that they learned. Plus, the Lord taught me a lot on my own and through reading scripture and application and just a lot of hard work. It's why in my videos you'll always see me wearing some kind of denim, because denim is for everybody. You can dress it up, you can dress it down, and denim stands for really the all-American hard work. Denim was, and dungarees and all that was developed in America. But to me, jeans, denim, at the very base of it means somebody that works hard, and I had to work very hard. Even though you make a commitment to the Lord, sometimes you have to work very hard to be able to enjoy the life and have the life that He wants you to have, and to move forward in what He's called you to do. So today is a big day for me. It's the first time I have ever shared publicly my story and what I went through. And once again, I'm saying this because this is the area, this is the video that starts to tell you about how my life crumbled. And I want to really remind you, it's so important to remind you that I love my parents, my mother and my father, and they're both in heaven. And I had conversations with them that my siblings never had, because we, all three of us, became and committed Christians. I mean, we grew up in a church, but we knew about God. We knew about Jesus. And there's a difference when you know about somebody and actually know them. So anyway, I want you to know that what you're going to hear, God has given me great understanding since it all occurred, great forgiveness. The last words between my mother and my father and me before he died, when I was my first year in nursing school for RN, was, "I love you, honey," and I said, "I love you, Daddy, too." And then my mother's last words, when she was in her 80s, were, "I love you, Mom," and she said, "I love you too." So our last words were of love, and I know that they're waiting for me in heaven. I have no hate, no any hard feelings towards them, or actually anybody in the world, actually anybody that's done me wrong. I'm just not like that. The Lord has taught me a lot. I know this has been a long intro, but I did want to get this across because it's very important to me, and because it is the first time I'll be sharing my story. Just another little caveat, I am wearing my mother's cross, gold cross that she had, and it's mine now, and her watch actually. So to remind me of her and to honor her and to thank her for giving me permission to share this story to help others, because it's uncomfortable, and also to thank my father, who at one time when I was 14, after 8 years of going through what I'll be telling you, said, "Betsy, Daddy's so sorry. Daddy doesn't know why Daddy does it, but Daddy is so sorry." So now, please join me in just a moment with part 2 of The Social Worker's Daughter, The Power of Love, Faith, and Forgiveness. Part 2 is called The Descent. The Descent. I would love to be able to tell you that the one time my father hit me was the last, but it was not. And instead it led to a period of 10 years of terror for me, from the age of 6 to 16. Once my father let his anger cross the boundary into physically hurting me, it seemed he could easily move into rage at any moment. He continued to come home and grill my mother about what she did all day and what was going to happen to her and the children if something happened to him. Thinking my father might listen to me if I spoke up, I repeated my efforts to tell him to stop. If he was upsetting my mom, but instead of making him understand as I had hoped, it was like a wire tripped inside of him. And he would lash out verbally, physically, or both. Initially, it would be a backhand across my face with my mom shouting his name and yelling at him to stop. Then in an instant, he would be on his knees at my chair, apologizing to me and saying he didn't mean it. Later, each evening after this happened, my mother would try to comfort me as I lay in bed. It's almost as if I can remember it like yesterday. And she'd repeat, "Daddy didn't mean it. Daddy had a hard day at work today. Daddy loves you. Daddy didn't mean it." And I remember thinking and even saying to my mother, if Daddy loves me and doesn't mean it, why does Daddy do it? It wasn't long before hitting me progressed to grabbing me, shaking me, throwing me, and then kicking me as I lay on the floor or was thrown on the floor by him. When I was thrown on the floor, I would curl up into fetal position with my head tucked down to meet my knees and my hands over my head with my arms held together like this to shield my face from his shoes. My arms would stop his shoes from hitting my face just inches away, and my knees pulled up kept him from connecting his shoe with my stomach or chest. I felt like a rag doll, and I knew when he hit me, threw me, kicked me, picked me, and shook me again, I had no idea which end was up or what was up. It may have been minutes or moments. I had no idea, but all I knew was it was always terrifying for me. The man I had known, loved, and trusted the first 6 years of life had become an amalgamation of a hero who sang to me, danced with me, and teased me, combined with some out-of-control monster that rose up on a regular basis. At one time, I saw his eyes and the intense anger in them as he was grabbing me by the arms, and I remember clearly thinking, how can my daddy hate me so much? His eyes and the anger and what I saw as hate filled his eyes, and it became a major trigger for me, and it still affects me to this day. Yet, the Lord has been faithful to help me in the reduction of the amount of discomfort it causes me. Remember, I was just 6 when all this began, and I was so small. I had no strength to stop him, and my mother, frozen in terror, would shout his name and yell, "Stop! One of these days you're going to kill her! One of these days you're going to kill her!" It's horribly sad to say that those are the words I remember most being spoken about me in childhood. It terrified me to hear my mother yelling those words at my father and to realize my father could do just that. He could kill me. It seemed to me he held nothing back. In fact, I think when my mother yelled, that it would somehow bring my father back from forever, wherever he was in his mind, and make him to realize what he was doing, and that he could very well kill me if he didn't stop. So then, whenever she would start to yell this, he would open up the door to the basement and would throw me down over the 5 or 6 top stairs to hit the side door of the house with my body, which then crumpled onto the landing in a heap. I would always try to catch the stairs beneath my feet if I could by using running movements. I was trying to slow the speed down before I hit the door. To me, the way and the power with which I hit the door reminded me of someone killing a fly with a fly swatter against a window pane. My small body always hit the door with a sickening thud. After I gathered my crumpled body up from the landing, I slid one by one by one down the old wooden steps to midway between the back hall landing and the basement floor. I sat there, the only light being from what came through the curtains of the side door on the landing and from the small windows at the top of the basement. There was a large oil painting of a musketeer-looking like man with dark, curly hair and a feathered hat. He had a long musket that he carried in his arms and eyes that seemed to follow me. It was creepy, eerie. I remember looking and feeling like he was watching me as I was sitting on those stairs, and he wouldn't stop. I would look away. I don't know how long I sat on those stairs, but I know that often it was at the beginning of a meal when I would get beaten and thrown down the steps. And so I do remember my mother trying to open the door and my father saying, "Leave her down there." But my mother would be able sometimes to give me a plate of food, and I would eat it on the steps as the rest of my family ate up in the kitchen. I have no idea what was going on up there. I imagine they just ate in silence. I don't know. But I do know that many times I ate in the basement on the stairs by myself, and there were times I didn't get to eat until my mother would call me at the door and say, "It's okay to come up now." And then I would go up the stairs and the kitchen would be empty except for my plate of food, and she would warm it up for me, and sometimes I just didn't even want to eat it very much because of what happened. These episodes, these horribly terrifying episodes, became so regular that I've lost count. I don't know, it went on for so many years. I have no idea how many there were. And eventually my father just stopped apologizing to me, and my mother started telling me to keep my mouth shut. My father too told me to keep my big mouth shut. This left me hurt and confused because I was attempting to keep the peace or get them to understand each other by what I was saying. I wanted them to stop arguing. Sometimes they called me Martha Raye, which was an American comedian actress, and her nickname was the Big Mouth. So they called me the Big Mouth or Martha Raye, and they would do this sometimes at two different times. One, sometimes if I spoke up to my father, and another was when I would try to be funny. Eventually, though, my sense of humor became what I used to save myself and the family from my father's terrifying eruptions. I could always sense when he was anxious, and I would try to ease it by being funny. And many times as I got older it worked, but there were other times it didn't work. I really was a happy child up until all this began, and even after the abuse began, I always wished I could find what it was that went wrong and fix it. So my father, the father I had known, that hero, would come back to us. Instead, for those 10 years, our abuse was kept quiet, and actually, up till now. And it was unknown to those surrounding us. Families, even in those days especially, kept these matters quiet as they were trying to protect the family name. Now, as I tell this story, It is not in an effort to hurt the family name, but rather in an effort to save others and to help others grow as myself, as my father, and as my mother grew when we became members of faith in Jesus and began to understand what it meant to follow him instead of just know about him. In all this activity and all this ups and downs, the one place that was my safety zone and the place where I excelled was school. I loved learning new things and still do, and I enjoyed having friends and meeting new people. I loved playing out on the playground. I loved and enjoyed the lunches my mom made for me, and that on the holidays we would be able to have a hot lunch. And at my school, those lunches were delicious. I was invited to birthday parties and outings. And I loved to laugh and had a quick wit. And it was actually in second grade when I received my nickname of Betsy. I remember there was a nun and 4 or 5 of us little girls showed up at her second grade class on the first day, all with the name of Elizabeth. She stood there in front of us and put her hands to her head and said, "How am I ever going to be able to tell you all apart?" So she lined us all up and started pointing to each girl and gave each one a nickname of Elizabeth, except for me. I was the one that got to keep the name Elizabeth. That is, until the end of the day when she declared and she looked at me and she said, "You are a Betsy, not an Elizabeth." And it has stuck with me all these years. I do have to admit that it really reflects my fun-loving personality and my love for people. Now, I've had people in private conversations, as I've said, I have not shared this story, and really there's most people that I know, even very close ones, that I've known for years and years, even some that are watching my video now that I've known for 40 years, over 40 years, have never heard my story, never heard what I went through. And so, in private conversations, some people have asked if my father did the same thing to my other siblings, and I'm sure anybody would wonder. Now, my best recollection and what I was present for was this. My oldest sister was never physically hurt. She was always a very good girl from the side that I saw that my parents reflected to me. And there's a sister under her, but right above me, got it sometimes. But again, it seemed like to me that she and my dad had a bond of some sort. And she would go fishing, and she was strong. She was a great swimmer. And she spoke her mind. She seemed not to have any trouble to speak her mind. And my brother beneath me did get the wrath of my father at times, and that really troubled me because the older two played together and I played more with my younger brother. And so I know one time when my father was doing beating him, I pulled my father off and he turned and beat me. I don't know if my brother remembers that or not. But I did tell my mother because it was so distressing to me. But again, I only saw what I saw, and they could have experienced other things I'm not privy about. But I do know that I was the only one that suffered as regularly and as violently on a regular basis. And that may be because I spoke up to him the most. As I said, I don't know what happened to the others. I think my brother probably yes, he did. But as far as, I don't remember my mother ever yelling in terror to my dad about the other ones to stop anything that he was doing because he might kill them. And I don't remember anybody else being thrown down the basement stairs or having to eat in the basement. I do remember my mother fairly often saying to my father, they're just children. They're just children, because I think he came home and he'd be so stressed, and we would be running in the house or, doing whatever that children do, and he would yell at us to stop, or this is not a gymnasium, or whatever it might be. As far as I know, this was probably one of the, I don't know, this was frightening. It was all frightening to me. So as far as I know, I was the only one that was choked by my father. And there were witnesses. One of my friends, who's still a dear friend after 58 years, was with me, and we ran through the hall to go up to the room, and my father just reached out and grabbed me by the neck and began to dangle me in front of him and choke me. And I was dangling in front of him, and I could see my friend and my sister and her friends, my eldest sister and her friend, just standing there, and their eyes, and I was like, Daddy, Daddy, I'm sorry, trying to squeak out. I always would be apologizing whenever, even in the kitchen, when he would throw me around, Daddy, I'm sorry. I never knew what I was sorry for. I just said it, hoping that he would stop. Anyways, my mother at this time, as he was dangling me and choking me, and my mother was screaming, and she screamed his name and commanded him, put her down. You're going to kill her. You are killing her. Put her down. My father was like he suddenly came to his mind, and he opened up his hands and dropped me on the floor in front of him in a heap. I don't really remember what happened after that. I don't know if my mother came and checked me. I think she did, and then she told the other children to go home. But I do know one thing, that day I knew without doubt that there was a very real possibility that my own father might kill me one day, and I had no idea why. I do remember somewhere in all these times, and I don't know exactly when it was or how old I was, but I think I was still like 6, 7, 8. I don't think it'd been happening very long, because one time when I'd been thrown over the basement stairs to the landing, I sat on those stairs in that dim light and thought about my situation. I remember thinking about, where can I go to be safe if he comes down here after me? We had no relatives in that city, and it was way before cell phones. And even if I had one, I didn't have a number to call. I told no one what was happening to me, because I thought that would be the end of me for sure. As I sat there, I thought about, where could I hide in the house if he came after me again? All I could think of was the room off to the left side of the bottom of the basement stairs. It was the coal room. It was where the coal was stored for a large coal furnace. I thought for sure they would not look in there for me. So I slid down the remaining steps and opened up the door quietly. I knew I could get in trouble for going in there, for not only being somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, but for getting my clothes dirty. But I had such a need for finding somewhere where I could be safe in the house. And I wanted to check it out. I stepped into the dark room, and I pulled the door shut behind me. I carefully climbed to the top of the large coal pile and sat down. A small amount of light seeped through the dirty glass of the window pane at the back bottom of the garage where the coal was loaded down a chute into the room. I listened closely to see if I could hear the sounds of any mice, or worse, rats that might be in there with me. Sitting atop that coal pile, afraid to stay inside the dark room with who knows what, and afraid to go outside of the room and possibly be beaten again, I realized that day, that evening, that there was no safety for me anymore in my own home. The only thing I knew was the reality that someday my own father's hands might kill me. Now, I want to let you know here that apart from this, my father, which seems strange, but maybe not such, was really a man of good report. He was never drunk and rarely drank. It was usually just a glass of wine and occasional beer and mixed drink. And those were usually given by one of my uncles. And he never spoke evil of others. I don't remember him ever speaking evil of others. Just getting after us kids. And sometimes he had some nicknames that weren't very nice. But never did I hear him curse or use obscene language or tell off-color jokes. He worked hard and saved up to buy a home with cash for his family when I was about 10 or 12, and he was well-liked and volunteered at church. He was kind to the neighbors, and he and my mother worked hard to keep our house looking nice and the lawn care done well. And even throughout this, we continued to go on picnics and outings and visited relatives and friends. I really do think my mother tried her best to keep my father happy and calm him if he came home anxious or upset. My mother cooked delicious meals and was a whiz at most domestic activities. Sewing, knitting. If she didn't know something, she'd get a book and learn how to do it. She did that even for reupholstering a chair. Both my parents were intelligent and well-read and very capable. Saturdays were my favorite. In the evening after our baths, when we would gather around the television, we'd watch Lawrence Welk with all the dancing and singing and other shows that I loved. It felt so normal, so safe. Sundays were special to me too. We'd go off to church, and I always believed in God and Jesus. And I remember it made me cry to know He died such a death for us. When we got home, easy listening music would be turned on the radio or records, and Mom would make a delicious Sunday dinner. I spent the remainder of the days drawing, playing games, reading or coloring. Later we would watch the Walt Disney Show, and that really seemed to be the best way to top off our weekend. So you can see, my life was quite a mix of things. But the one thing that it was a descent from the life I had known my first 6 years. And for me, it seemed it would never be the same. My father seemed to become a dark shadow that cast fear into the lives of his family, robbing us of the sun and happier days we had known before he had taken his job as a social worker to help others with their problems, many who were widowed, single, or divorced mothers with children. I want to thank you for joining me for part 2, The Descent of my story, The Social Worker's Daughter, the power of love, faith, and forgiveness. I want to assure you that even though that was very difficult to watch, and it was difficult to say too, because it's so not a part of my life anymore because of what Jesus has done and his amazing ability and the amazing ability of the Word of God and of just what God can do, how he can change a life. So I hope you will join me next week as we're part 3. I'm beginning to think that this might actually be just a bit of a mini series because I don't want to leave anything out, because there is so much that I feel could benefit people. Anyway, once again, thank you for joining me. I hope you have a blessed week. May God shine on you. May he hold you in the palm of his hand. Until we meet again, goodbye.